To everyone. Begin the session. First of all, I'd like to welcome you all for this lecture. This lecture is named as Ramchandra Gandhi Memorial Lecture. It is an annual lecture in our department. Professor Ramchandra Gandhi was a founding head of the Department of Philosophy at the University of Hyderabad. He worked under a renowned philosopher like Peter Strawson, and his contributions to philosophy, particularly in philosophy of language communication and say in Indian philosophy, is well known. The older books like he has Presuppositions of Human Communication and Sita's Kitchen are very famous books. And he has also a book called I Am Thou, not the I Am Thou like of Martin Buber. From the department, on behalf of the department, I express my sense of gratitude to the donor of this endowment lecture. But at the request of the donor, I can't name the donor here. I'm supposed to introduce also the today's speaker. We are actually, in fact, I am greatly honored to welcome Professor Arindam Chakrabarti, a distinguished philosopher. His work was significantly shaped both Indian and contemporary analytic philosophy. Professor Chakrabarti completed his MA in philosophy from Presidency College, Kolkata, and his DPhil from the University of Oxford, where he worked under the supervision of the renowned philosopher Professor Strawson. So this is a common thing between Professor Ramchandra Gandhi and Professor Arindam Chakrabarti, both were students of Professor Strawson. And over the course of his illustrious career, he has taught at the University of Delhi. Then he has also taught at the University of Hawaii in Manoa, and most recently he has been working at a university called Ashoka University. His research spans a wide range of fields, including metaphysics, epistemology, philosophy of mind, language, logic, aesthetics, and of course Indian philosophy. He has written extensively on topics such as truth, consciousness, the nature of self, negation, and emotion. Dr. Chakrabarti has been trying to combine analytic philosophy and classical Indian philosophies, especially Naya and Kashmir psychology, and with continental philosophies. Besides numerous papers in journals and anthologies, his major publications include his book on negative existentials and external discourse called Denying Existence. Then he has an introduction to the 20th century epistemology in Sanskrit, and 5 books in Bangla, and the latest on the philosophy of food and clothing. His co-edited volumes include Knowing from Words with Professor B.K. Madlan and Universals, Concepts and Qualities with Professor Strawson, and Apo Buddhist Nominalism with Marx, Socrates, and Ram Kilans, and of course one more called Mahabharata now with Professor Sivjivan Bhattacharya. Shivaji Bandapathan. We are really honored to have Professor Chakrabarti visit to Hyderabad Central University, and I'm sure his lecture will be enlightening and thought-provoking. And without much delay, I have to invite him to deliver his lecture.
Ya Shri Tamisra Tamasa Parastat Ya Jyotisham Jyoti Apam Kabhire Ya Darsha Krishna Purnendubha Stam Umkaranatho Kamayet Umam Ma. I have these 7 parts to my talk today. Of course, it's an honor for me to commemorate my elder brother in philosophy, although he was 11 years, 12 years senior to me. But he passed away, Ramchandra Gandhi. I would say between K.C. Bhattacharya and Ramchandra Gandhi, these two were the most original philosophers from India, whom, lest people misunderstand, we should stop calling them Indian philosophers. They are Indian and they are philosophers. But just as attributing adjectives can be misleading. A small elephant is not something which is small, an elephant. So, by Indian philosophy, we mean a small part of world philosophy and philosophy as such. And anyone who has read K.C. Bhattacharya's lectures on caste would know that it would be a mistake, a colonial Orientalist mistake, to call K.C. Bhattacharya an Indian philosopher, although most of his writings start from Advaita Vedanta and Yoga, Samkhya. But he was an original philosopher. Similarly, I was very embarrassed on behalf of Central University of Hyderabad, extremely embarrassed that country, Ramu Gandhi's memorial lecture is happening for the first time in Hyderabad, where he taught. The great student of K.C. Bhattacharya called N.V. Banerjee also taught initially. And then N.V. Banerjee's student, Margaret Chatterjee, taught. But K.C. Bhattacharya started his career with Advaita Vedanta, and all his life talked about Kant. So I would like to start with just a set of 4 questions that Kant asked. I am hoping that, by the way, my embarrassment is that the magnum opus by Ramchandra Gandhi, called I Am Thou, Investigations into the Truth of India, extremely important book, which was republished with great aplomb, 2nd edition, with a long introduction by Prof. Gupta, another professor of linguistics in this university. I actually have a copy. I didn't bring because it was too heavy. And after the surgery, I don't feel like carrying it. So, but I did bring availability of religious ideas, at least the names of books by R.C. Gandhi you should teach your students and PhD students. So he started with a book on Whitehead. He did a PhD in India first, and then he wrote his thesis on speech act theory, and it is called Presuppositions of Human Communications. OUP India published it. Then he published Availability of Religious Ideas from Macmillan, London, which has been republished in the last 7-8 years by Ashoka University series, with an introduction by me, and then he wrote his big book, sitting in Pune, called I Am Thou, which is dedicated to Ramana Maharshi. But he went on to write 4 more books, one of them fiction, Sita's Kitchen. I'm sure some of these facts are known to some of you, but I'll start with Kant. So, at the end of the Critique of Pure Reason, and then again, in his logic lectures, there are 4 transcribed versions of people who took notes of his regular class in logic. And the lectures began with a sort of bird's eye view of the field of all of philosophy. Another such huge introduction to all philosophy you find in the long introduction and preface to the Critique of Judgment. In any case, the logic begins by a very brief statement that human reason asks, pure reason asks 3 main questions. Question number 1, what can we know? Which I have tried to answer, I means Kant, in the Critique of Pure Reason. Second question is, how ought I to live? What should I do? And I have tried to answer that in the Critique of Practical Reason. And the third question is, what may I hope? If I manage to do what I ought to do, then what may I hope? And this is answered in part 2 of the Critique of Judgment, which unfortunately in India most people ignore. Critique of Judgment has 2 parts. Critique of Aesthetic Judgment, which we all study, and Critique of Teleological Judgment, which is about what we may hope. But in the logic lectures, he goes on to say, once these 3 questions are answered, we should be able to answer the single most important question, which is the 4th question. And Kant phrases this as follows. Was ist man? What is man? What is man? Now, I want to find an echo of this question in the first chapter of Availability of Religious Ideas by Ramchandra Gandhi. Does anybody remember the first chapter of that book? I would like to show a hand of how many of you guess. It's called What It Is Like to Be a Human Being. What it is like to be a human being. This was when it was very trendy in the West, and therefore we are loyal colonial subjects, so we imitate everything of the West, from dress, as we can see, to language, as we can see in my language. So, a man called Thomas Nagel wrote a paper called What It Is Like to Be a Bat. So everybody was talking about consciousness. In fact, contemporary work that some of your PhD students are working on the hard problem of consciousness is a direct heir to that essay because what it is like to be something, the internal phenomenal field, which is sometimes called a qualia. This is all coming from that legal article. So I would like to claim that Ramchandra Gandhi, consciously, unconsciously, but he was very crafty and subtle. He wouldn't say, I'm writing a commentary on Kant, but he was following a tradition which is both much older than Kant as well as much later. As older, I would cite the Mahabharata, which has this mysterious line in the Shanti Parva. And the line is uttered by a swan, a bird. And it turns out that the bird is in disguise Brahma or somebody. But the bird says, Na manusha sreshtataram nikinchit. There is nothing which is higher than humanity. Humanity, Manusha, is greater than gods, according to Mahabharata. Contrary to what we are used to thinking about Indian tradition. That's before Kant. After Kant, I hope all of you know, the greatest woman philosopher in the 20th century, Jewish person, but she wrote a book called The Human Condition, which is about humanity. And her name is Hannah Arendt. And I'll come to the second point, meaning is use, and what is the central use of a proper name. Through Hannah Arendt. Hannah Arendt, a little bit like second verse of Isha Upanishad. I'm sure Amba Kulkarniji remembers. Kurvan eve karmani jijivishet shatam sama evam tvai na anyatha ita asti na karma lipyate nare. So the word nara, human, is mentioned in the second verse. And what is it about? It is about karma. The whole second verse, whether Shankaracharya likes it or not, it is about action. Right? Now, I translated karma as action, but karma is a wider concept. So Hannah Arendt's book, Human Condition, is divided into three kinds of karma. The first part is called labor. Physical, biological, shrama, labor. Obviously, something about the human makes them able to work with their body and with their hands. I have published independently, and Mahabharata has a lot, so does Aristotle, so does Kant, about the specialty of the human hands, which can embrace like Amritananda Mahima, and it can kill. The same hands. It can build atom bombs and guns, and it can also craft beautiful artwork. It can make gestures to invite people. It can make fists to punch people's noses. That's the human hand. And in a crucial story in the Shanti Parva and in the Anushasana Parva, Mahabharata says that all these subhuman, the beasts, the animal kingdom, who are much more social and much better in handling natural environment than humans. But they envy the humans because of one thing, not because of their rationality. But a jackal says to a Brahmin in a story where the Brahmin was walking on the street, but a rich man's big, what are those Tesla cars, like a Ratha, it hits him and he falls on the road. Okay. And he knew that the rich man was ignorant. He was not very educated. But he has money. So he got frustrated. Lying down on the road, being hit by a chariot of a rich man. And he says, I don't want to get up. I'll die here. He wants to commit suicide. Because what is the point of all my study? He's a great Vedic scholar. Right? When you see, a great scholar like K.C. Bhattacharya, or like Bhattacharya Ramashastri, or like Bhadranath Shukla, or like Amba Kulkarni, if they have to be subservient, like servants to some corporate businessman who have no education, they will naturally feel frustrated, which also, of course, is the state of education in our country now. But then, in the King of Gods, he takes the disguise of a jackal and whispers to this, as if the jackal is sniffing on this dead body-like person on the street, and he finds that he's alive. Mahabharata story. And he says, what are you doing? You still have got two hands. Look at us. We don't have hands. And he doesn't say that I can't make a Taj Mahal or I can't paint a Mona Lisa. He says, I can't even scratch all parts of my body. You can reach every part of your body with your hand. We have inflexibility. If it scratches and if there are worms and insects, I cannot be. You are so lucky. And he says, you've got Devadatte Dashanguli. You've got 10 fingers. If there is anyone who even knows merely the Brahminical Vedic daily rituals, at least some of you may remember that there is a famous Purusha Sukta, which says 1,000-headed, 1,000-handed, 1,000 feet. Primeval Purusha arose in the beginning. Sahasra Shirsha, Sahasrabhat, Sagunim Sarvato Ritva. And then what does it say? Atyatishta Dashangulam. 10 fingers above. One Ramu Gandhi-like creative interpretation could be that human beings with their flexible 8 fingers and the facing thumb with which they can make things. And they can make not only the don't fear posture, but they can make the Jnana Mudra, making the Angushta and the Tarjani, the index finger and the thumb touch together, which the Buddha does. And Shiva does Dakshinamurti with this Dasanguli. So he says, get up, the jackal whispers. When your mind gets all confused by too many social media readings in the morning, you need advice from your cat or your dog or your locality jackal. The jackal says, compare yourself. You are human. And then he ends the discourse by saying, Na pani lava adhikam, lavam kanchana manya. I think according to my opinion, there is no other acquisition better than acquisition of hands. So this hand is something that characterizes the humans, and the chapter on labor is about that by Hannah Arendt. Part 2, after labor comes work. Big book on work. And what is the last chapter? Called action. Action is typically human. And of actions, the greatest is not in the contemporary dirty sense, but in the high Greek sense, political action, where you maintain difference of views, and amongst a plural society, you negotiate by distribution of power through politics. And that too, you have to do not by guns and hired killers and murder and shouting and chanting slogans, but by rule-following language. So the action chapter is mostly about the act of using language, which of course distinguishes humans from non-humans. We still don't know what language a rabbit or a squirrel speaks. Our Shastras talk about all the living beings having their own language. There is a sutra in Yoga Sutra that in the Vibhuti Path that with a certain kind of samadhi or focus, you can begin to understand Sarva Bhuta Ruta Jnana, the language of snakes, the language of. But we are not talking about that. Now, so Hannah Arendt rightly says language qualifies. That is what is special about humans. In language, we know both from Mahabhashyakara, from Yaska, that there are at least major two parts. Language is spoken in sentences. And the sentence is, as Chomsky linguistics does, NP and VP. What is NP? Noun phrase. VP, verb phrase. So, Nama Akshata. Akshata roughly, slightly different in Vimarśa, but Akshata is verb. But the major part, according to Rigveda, where does language start? It starts when people start calling things by name. So that brings me to the center of language. My second point is the main meaning of proper names. Now, proper names appear to be meaningless tags. And notice the word identifiers. Right? So, if there are 5 people here who are all called Chakrabarti, even Ramchandra Gandhi's maternal grandmother was called Chakrabarti Raja Gopalachari. Okay, Tamil man. And we have a friend, Motilal's student, called Chakrabarti Ramaprasad. But if there are 5 Chakrabartis, how to identify me? By Arindam. So that's an identifier. In point number 5, I will go deeper into the concept of identification. But first, if meaning is used, and this is where I want to say that it was to the credit of Ludwig Wittgenstein, who first gave the Purva-Paksha view. His early philosophy is his main opponent. In that early view, all sentences are nothing but strings of names. And what does a name do? A name refers to stands for designates an object. So, if I am missing once my wife's colleague and a friend, Rajit Basu, whom I was expecting here. But the word project, Rajit Basu, proper name, even if he's absent, it refers to him. The name Kailas, it refers to a particular peak of the Himalaya, Everest, like that. The name Hyderabad, the name Kolkata, the name London, these are all names of objects and names of people. Rajit, Ramesh, Amba, Kavita, these are all names. Now, the most popular theory in the West since John Stuart Mill was that these names are meaningless marks. Vyasa, the dark man who was not only the author of the Mahabharata, but also the wiki donor, the sperm donor for many of its actual characters. Because all these people like the Dhritarashtra, Pandu, they were all actually born of the sperm of Vyasa. So, he is the author of the Mahabharata in more than one sense. So, but the word Vyasa in Sanskrit geometry means diameter. Therefore, radius is called Vyasartha. Now, Vyasa, that dark man who was so ugly that one of the women closed her eyes when he came to the bed, and that's why the child was black, Dhritarashtra. He was not a diameter, but he is called Vyasa. Nor was the former American president Bush leafy. He was not made of leaves, as bushes are. And the author of Process and Reality, at least all his life when he was born, did not have a white head. That is the influential view that the meaning of proper names, like Arindam, it has a lexical meaning. It means one who dominates over, if possible, kill his enemies. Now, I would like to claim that I don't have enemies. And even if I had some, I would never dominate them. They will dominate me. But I am still called Arindam. And this view, which was kind of rejected by Russell, by his theory of definite descriptions, and that's complicated, but was revived by Saul Cook as the concept of rigid designation. But what happens when we reject this Tractarian view of naming of objects, but take the word calling, Calling, the verb calling, bulana, ahvan. Okay? So, non tu vishve amritasya putra. Listen. This is calling people. Long ago in our childhood, when there was no television, my early childhood, in the radio, All India Radio, there was an English medium channel. I think it was called Calcutta P in my place. And they had a program called Calling All Children. And we have examples of that. In a corner, I think in the 250s of philosophical investigation. And here we have a Wittgenstein expert sitting, R.C. Pradhan. You will know that there is a line by Wittgenstein. Of course, in the beginning, there is the line, meaning is use. But there is another line. Meaning is like going up to someone. So it is a communicative act. I come close to you and say something. That is what makes my sentences meaningful. So it is an interhuman, interpersonal activity. It is an action. This is why meaning and language are discussed in the chapter called Action, the last chapter of the human condition by Hannah Arendt. What happens when the meaning and use of proper names, when they are not used to refer to anyone? Famous verse for the Vaishnavas. In fact, the most famous 16 names in one mantra, after which we have an international ISKCON movement. They are all addressing, because they don't use the name Hari, they use the name Hare, which is a sambodhana. But the verse I was thinking is daily uttered by millions of Indians. Millions. Hare Murare Madhukaita Bhare Gopala Govinda Mukunda Shabri Jajnesha Narayana Sri Krishna Vishnu Nirashrayam Mam Jagadisha Raksha. More than 12, 13 synonyms. Are they synonyms? Hare and Murare Madhukaita Bhare Gopal, cowherd, it means cowherd. Somebody who tends cow to cow. But that's not what Murari means. Murari means somebody who kills a demon called Mura. But none of those names mean that. None of them. It is a device of calling, invoking. And this, and as a result, if you just translate them into the object that they refer to, then you have absurd results like bad translations, like the following. Once, when this central university was established, in all of humanities in India, this was the place which was famous for advanced translation studies. I don't know what is happening now, but this was a place where comparative philology, comparative literature, and language studies was very important. So in Sanskrit department, as well as, is the translation study center still there? Right. Now, there is a line in the most famous and one of the briefest Upanishads called Isha Upanishad, by referring to the second verse of which I started this lecture. Na karma lipyate nare. In humans, their action does not cling. It's like humans can have a Teflon on them, so that they perform the action, but the action slides away from them. Na lipyate. Lipta. You do the action, but you don't get attached to it. Now, that line comes at the end of the Upanishad. It is a prayer. Pushan, first word, literally means the sun, the nourisher. Ekarshe, addressing form, vocative form. I call the lecture vocative turn. So I am making, and Ramchandra Gandhi is making us all turn from referential use of names or descriptive use of names to vocative use. What is it to do? Sambodhana. Right? Pushan Ekarshi means the only Rishi. A Rishi is Krantadarshi. A Rishi is somebody who sees into the far, who sees, to use a Gadavar word, see to the horizons, into the Chakrabarti. That's it. The only Rishi. Bhushan Ekarshe, Ekarishi. Yama, ultimately, the heat of the sun will heat the universe up, burn it up. Like Yama does. Yama, Surya, Bhushan Ekarshe, Yama, Surya, Prajapatya, Yuvarashmin, Samuha Teja, Yatte, Rupam Kalyanatamam, Tatte Pasham. Now, Bhushan Ekarshe, Yama, Surya, Prajapatya. They are co-referential, they are all referring to Surya. If you thought reference with the meaning, then you should have translated it as sun, 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 sun. But that's obviously a wrong translation. Here is I have just given you the reductio ad absurdum of the theory that a name only stands for and refers to an object. It does not. It is used to invoke in different ways. In different ways, like we do Krishna, Keshava, Murare. Similarly, one could address Professor Spivak in Columbia University and say, Gayatri, please protect us with your singing. Since Gayatri literally means that which Trayate, when sung, Gayana, Trayati, Trayate, the Gayatri. Therefore, there is a joke here. Because Spivak happens to also sing very well. But it does not mean that. We are not talking about the song. We are talking about her. And we are not talking about anything. We are invoking. And this is why the ancient theory, which is in part theory, is Vakyapadya. At the end of sadhana samudesha on the karakas, there is sambodhana. Some together. Some is like the German word mit, M-I-T, which means with others. Like mit sign of Heidegger means together being. Similarly, sambodhana. Bodhana is awakening. Bodhana is awakening. So, awakening together. Suppose you are asleep. I'm sure in 10 minutes now, when I keep talking, many of you will fall asleep or at least doze off. I would suddenly call one of you and I would be together. Not only awakening you, but Ramchandra Gandhi will show us how when I awaken the consciousness in you, I also thereby together myself get awakened. Why? Because I am doing the central meaningful act. I am awakening the human in you, the conscious in you, and I am also, because artificial intelligence can refer to objects. It knows the meanings of the reference of names better than us and faster. But speed and encyclopedic Google knowledge, that is not humans are special for. AI does it better than us. But individually going up to somebody. Now you'd say nowadays robots clean the floor and you get these robots going around cleaning. But it doesn't know when it meets the person what is special about it. Especially if it is a stranger. The data has to be fed in beforehand for it to know that a human being, and will now, from this theory, just one more thing, birth theory and his commentator, Raja, disagree about this. Birth theory says, unlike the other karakas, the verb-related roles, like the role of the agent, the role of the patient, or the role of the accusative, the role of the instrument, the role of the dative, the role of the ablative, the where from, etc., and the locative. These are parts of the sentence. They cluster around the verb. But sambodhana, address, stands outside the sentence. So sambodhana and its whatever its meaning is not part of the vakyartha, of the meaning of the sentence. This is what you say. Raja in the commentary disagrees, although he is totally respectful to the writer of the original. So, what is it according to Ram? According to Ramchandra Gandhi, now I come to the fourth point. I have covered 1, 2, 3, and now R.C. Gandhi's theory of addressing or calling. I'll just read one sentence from Ramchandra Gandhi, and which but while before coming to that, between Bhartrihari and Ramachandra Gandhi, I would place Abhinavagupta as a philosopher of language. Abhinavagupta writes in his independent book, not a commentary on Utpaladeva, not his Tantraloka, but a book called Paratrimshika Vivaran. He says, and I'll translate, the sense in which the addressor and the addressee, though different, become one in the addressing is indicative of the Para goddess, whose characteristic is identity in difference. So, a little note now on the relationship between so we have two ends. Subject, conscious, first person, I. Right? If you forget your book learning, but use your common sense and your sense of any language that you speak, and I ask you, how many I's do you know? The term I, it's a singular term. What does it refer to? Does it refer to you? It only refers to me, right? What does that mean? Is it like Arindam? So, when you read in Descartes' meditation, I think therefore exists, I exist. Would you interpret it as Arindam thinks therefore Arindam exists? You won't. In fact, all your teachers should have taught you, in undergraduate or postgraduate, that it does not mean Descartes thinks therefore Descartes exists. It does not. Once again, back to the question, how many I do you know? Do you know more than one? Only one eye. Do you understand? When Professor Tommy says, okay, I'm feeling very tired, would you say, sir, I don't know. What do you mean? Because I'm not feeling tired. Or another argument. If Professor Tommy says, I have a pain in my knee, or he says, I don't believe in Marxism, can you or I say, no, I disagree. I don't have a pain in my knee? Is that a disagreement? Because I don't have a pain in my knee. When he said, I have a pain in my knee, and I can say, truly, I don't have a pain in my knee. Suppose I am a Marxist, and he says, I don't believe in Marxism. I said, that's false. I believe in Marxism. What's happening? So the sentence, I don't believe in Marxism, does not have a single meaning. Even the sentence, I am sick, does not have the same meaning. Everyone uses the sentence to mean something different. Is I, then an ambiguous word? Like some people when they say, I live on the bank. Some people mean that they live by the side of a river. Some people mean that there is a State Bank of India underneath house. Like that, the word bank is ambiguous, equivocal. Is the word I equivocal? These are things on which the whole first and second chapter of the book Subject as Freedom is written. So I is a puzzling word. And it is the crucial word in Kashmir Shaikh. So much so that he thinks it is a mantra. A mantra which in brief, like A to Z, means all the 15 letters of the Sanskrit alphabet. Why? Because they start with A, E, and ends with Sa, Sha, and Ha. So A to Ha, Aham. This is Abhinavagupta's theory of the meaning of Aham. So on the one hand, subjectivity is captured by I. Man. This is the me generation. Man. Okay. If you want to reassure in Bollywood words, you would add, for some reason, a negation to it. And you say, Main hu na. I don't know what the negation is doing there. But it sounds like that. It's reassuring. It sounds like I'm reassuring you, but when really time comes, I may not be there. Because it says, nah, in any case, I'm joking. This is my Guru Parampara from Ramchandra Gandhi. You know, in the middle of a very serious discourse, Ramu would actually get, you know, even talking about Bollywood songs and all. I learned it from him. I still remember in India International Center, he was giving a talk on Ramana Maharshi. And he was speaking from here. On the other side of the stage, there was a huge portrait of only the face of Ramana Maharshi. With those beautiful eyes, which look like naturally he has put kajal in them. That's how Ramana Maharshi's eyes look. And I remember Ramuda was tense, audience, pin drop silence. And he'll begin this historic lecture. And he keeps silent for 1 minute. And then he starts the lecture, not with a Pandit type Sanskrit verse that I said, but with a Hindi film song. He pointed at the painting and he said, Tere aankhein ke siwa duniya mein tu rakha kya? except your beautiful eyes, what is there in the world? So, my Mayuna, you should excuse. Abhinavagupta says, the sense in which the addresser and the addressee, though different, become one in the addressing is indicative of para, apara together. So, para, the transcendental unity of perception, is aham, I. It's not one of the objects in the world. It is the click, not the drishya. It is the object. It is the subject, not the object. It cannot be found as one of the items. I can see everything. I can't see myself. I was disappointed. When I came in, there was a photo of me. I told myself, Shankaracharya could not be mistaken. He said, how can you see the self? So that's not me. That's a photograph. That's an idam. That's a this. So on the one hand is the pure subject, the pure I, the purna ahanta, the cosmic I. On the opposite extreme are this or that object, idam. And that is how we treat objects when even Kant asks, what is man? There are many species in the world. Is Kant telling us, well, you should know what is the special thing about the species of dogs, the species of monkeys? Read Darwin, Origin of Species, and then you will know about man. Why do we need to know about Marushat? No, he was not talking about that. Because that is treating individual humans as well as humanity as an object of knowledge. But between the subject and object, what do we find? Not the first person, not the third person. What do we find? We find this more mysterious word than I and Aham. Tum, Tvam, you, second person. And do you see the connection? The second person is the addressee. Sambodhana, that towards which, and Abhinav. Here, Bhartiyari goes back. Bhartiyari said, Abhimukhi Karana. Somebody was looking elsewhere. We are going, passing. A friend, I see them. I am at the back of the friend. I come up to them and I say, hey, buddy. Hey, dear friend. Sakhe. Sakhe. Hey, friend. Right? The moment you say, the man turns to you. I'll end this lecture with a thought experiment done in this hall, which is about turning towards yourself. But this is in the middle. Not only in the name of the Nagarjuna's philosophy called Madhyamika, but everywhere in Tantra, in Vijnana Vairava, the middle, in the problem of ARB, relationship R, everywhere in philosophy, the middle is the most mysterious. Including in Hatha Yoga. We understand pranayama, inhalation, exhalation. But in between, there is something which is not just somehow holding your breath in a kumbhaka, but it is that hairline gap between inhalation and exhalation. Similarly, between aham and idam, between aham and asau. Asau far away. Yo asau purusha in the sun, whatever that great God is in the sun, whose face is covered by the golden disk. Iranmayena patre satyasya piritamukha. That is the remote. I am small compared to that. And then there is this filling up. Everything is my subjectivity. Because, as Kant says, and I think must be capable of accompanying every thought that I have. But in between that I and he, the I and she, the I and that is you. Thou, What is that? It is neither para nor apara, but para. And that is called the Shakti or goddess. With similar non-dualistic insight, RCG has in his monograph, this book, Availability of Religious Ideas, characterized addressing as a uniquely non-coercive, non-referential, quintessentially communicative, non-causal invitation of the attention of the other person while giving notice of his or her freedom not to respond. If I go up close to Ramesh and say, Professor Pradhan, how are you? I am not catching him by the hand or by his neck and saying, you have to answer. That is coercion. I am giving him the freedom to ignore me, to answer in monosyllabic, to give a ritualistic answer like I'm fine. Right? Like kids these days, in order to be polite, when they mean, I don't want the food that you are giving me. As an adult, you force feed your kids and their friends, they come home, you say, have this sweet, have this samosa. And what do they say? Very strange thing. It's a common habit. What do they say? They say, I am good. Why do they say that? You spend time in America, you know. Why do they say that? I feel like saying, who asked you whether you are good or bad? I said to you, please have this food. But no. So good means don't want that food. I am good. Very strange. But addressing is not like that. There is no coercion. So I'll read that again. These are all well chosen words. It is a unique act. Non-coercive, non-referential. I am not speaking about Professor Pradhan. I am speaking to him. Speaking to is not speaking about. Right? My teacher who taught me Wittgenstein in MA he passed away. His name was Sachin Ganguly, S.N. Ganguly. His student and lifetime feminism and Wittgenstein teacher called Shefali Moitu wrote an original article called Speaking to and Speaking About. Okay. And speaking to somebody is not talking about them. You are inviting the attention of somebody. That's the act of addressing. But while we draw attention, we give notice of his or her freedom not to respond. This is the risk you take when you call somebody. They might not respond. They might turn their head and go away. They might smile and go away. Or they might respond. Or somebody might be very senile like me. And you have just made the mistake of asking, how are you doing? And that person described on a day-to-day basis like me, what is happening to them, how many times they had acidity and what diseases they have. That's called, in very good Sanskrit, it is called TMI. Too much information. Right? I mean, that's the new Sanskrit of emoji language. Abhinavagupta says, the second person, you, is characteristic of Shakti, neither Shiva nor Nara, nor the human being which is just an object, nor Shiva who is the ultimate subjectivity of the universe, like the Brahmasmi of the world. But that second person acquires the aspect of the first person, which is characteristic of Shiva when, for instance, one feels Beautiful example from romantic friendship, not necessarily sexual, but you say, Advaita, darling, Advaita, Tvameva, you and me. My dear friend, you indeed am I. So this is the I. Now that takes me to the three senses of identification. To reconstruct Abhinavagupta's sustained argumentation in the part 1, Jnanadhikaram of Ishvara Pratyavika Vimarsham, self-luminous, subjective consciousness can access, it has the capacity in memory to access other times. You go to the past, vividly. You describe, you can feel that your childhood is happening. I was hearing the sound of the fireworks last night and was remembering my childhood as if I've gone back there, right? Self-luminous subjective consciousness can access other times, other places, right? You pass by some residence in faculty housing. I didn't go this time, but previously I would, go to. I think Kulkarni used to live in the campus, no? Professor Kulkarni. So, and on the way, you smell cooking. You smell Bengali cooking. And then you feel like you're in Calcutta. So this is consciousness can shift places and shift other times. And if it can do other places and other times, why not other minds? And when does consciousness go across to another mind? When it starts by sambodhana, by addressing you. I'm not describing you. I'm not commanding you. I'm calling you. What a beautiful word. Call. Call for help. Call. A doctor during the pandemic, all day and all night. What is she? She is on call. Right? Let us stop and meditate on that C-A-L-L, that word. So, consciousness in its cosmic, metaphysical, ontological nature has the playfulness of first creating a difference. That's me, that's us, that person, we, many plural, many selves. They are encased by their skin. Salman Rushdie, in a novel, makes up this rock music song which says, in the frontiers of the skin, where I end and you begin. This is where I end. If I shake hands with the head of the department, professor, even then, although the hands are touching, I end here and his hand begins elsewhere. Between these differences, then it can unify not just by touching, by what Kant calls synthesizing. In the art of the transcendental deduction of categories, in the first critique, Kant talks about three syntheses. Synthesis of apprehension in intuition. Synthesis of reproduction. Imagination, reproduction and imagination. And synthesis of recognition in concepts. This synthesizing, samanvaya. Through that, the contrast of the two stretches of experience, past and present, yours and mine, has to eliminate, consciousness has to eliminate both. You might say, but at the deepest level, I don't know what exactly Professor Tommy is thinking. Some of it I see in his face. Face is the best window for the soul. The tractator says, and our Sanskrit tradition also says, through the eyes, look at them, If eyes look at eyes, they know. But there is a part that I don't know. The problem of other minds. But here Abhinavagupta gives a very strange argument. He says, if you are sensitive, you feel frustrated that my beloved, all of it I don't know. It's like I'm holding that hand, but there part of the hand that I am not being able to cover. That's what makes that other person an independent free being. Because they can hide, consciously or unconsciously, something that they feel that I don't know. But Abhinava says, in order to perceive absence, Nyaya tells us, you have to know both the anuyogi, the locus, as well as the pratiyogi, or the counterpositive of the absence. What I miss is his mental state. I have some conception of that through my consciousness. And the details of it, I am frustrated that I don't know. But in order for me to feel that that knowledge is absent in me, my consciousness must have enveloped it. And this is what I give notice of, that when I ultimately go for identifying. Let me just quickly say the three meanings of identify, which was supposed to be the function of proper names. So I'm still on that topic. To identify is to recognize a long lost item or person, as in the mother was called to identify the captured fugitive son at the police station. They call the mother, is this your son? That is identification. In prisons, you have identification parades. This is to recognize as the same as a past particular or person. So this is a kind of, in Sanskrit, this is called pratyabhijna, re-identification. Second, to identify is to pick out, uniquely specify the topic of conversation out of a range of possible topics. Right? So if I say that in spite of the vaccine, COVID-19 has come back in 2025. I am not talking about coming. I am not talking about back. I am not talking about the vaccine. I am talking mainly about COVID-19. That's the identifying expression. That is the second. Third, to identify. And this is where we are passing from addressing to Advaita. To identify is for someone to think or feel oneself to be the same as someone else. This is to equate. This is an identity in the sense in which the morning star is identical with the evening star. And that is the sense in which Tat and Tvam are identical. Aham and Brahman are identical. All these three senses of identification are involved in the act of addressing. I have taken a lot of time, so I will stop here. I'll skip. There is a part, but in the chapter called Theism, Non-Theism and Morality, he talks about Kali worship. Because yesterday night, Bengalis, the Diwali night is Kali Puja night. So I was thinking constantly and reading this passage. Invocatively meaning her, Kali, not a piece of stone. But looking at the stone and singing, one of the favorite so-called idolatrous Bengalis who worship these clay models. But remember, they worship Durga, this 10-handed goddess, but then throw it in the river. They are not worshipping the clay and the straw. right? There's a song that is favorite. It's sung in every Kali Puja. Mayer Murti Godate Chaj, Moner Brome Mati Diye. It is your mental error that with clay, with mitti, with earth, you are trying to build a sculpt, an image of the cosmic mother, whose nakedness is explained by spiritual sadhakas in the following way. My teacher, who was a Vaishnava but initiated me to Kali worship, he said, how can she wear clothes? Every millisecond she is having to give birth to crores and crores of cosmoses. She has no time to wear clothing. How much dress does a woman giving birth in the delivery room wear? She is constantly giving birth. She is the mother par excellence, cosmically, constantly, perpetually, timeless. So this Kali, in front of a stone, this Kali is being addressed. Ramchandra Gandhi says, thou invokes her. It could also be a piece of abstract art sanctioned by contemporary aesthetic sensibility, as when we worship not a goddess with a lolling tongue, but a yantra, a geometrical shape. And I address that. But whom am I addressing? The ritual books. I just did that in the Durga Puja, dictating to the priest. And the book says, you do this dhyana, meditation on Kali. Karala Vadanam Ghoram, Muktakeshim Chaturpujam, Kalikam Dakshinam Divyam, Mundamala Shushrobhitam. After that, you put that flower in your head and you say, Atman, the worshipper, should think of himself as Kali. And the main worship will be done inside the body of the worshipper. So it is not Ramchandra Gandhi's fad or new trend to say that if you are invoking Kali, then you are invoking her inside yourself. So with that, I will end with the verse with which Abhinavagupta ends the most mature book, long commentary on Ishvara Pratyabhijna, called Ishvara Pratyabhijna, Vivriti Vimarshini. And he addresses his readers. This is the last verse in that 5 volume book. And I'll read the translation first. Who wants to speak to stones? Not primitive man, not primitive Hindus, not Hindus before they were enlightened by Arya Samaj. Nobody speaks to stone. On the other hand, a child speaks to his doll. It speaks to his Barbie doll. It makes friends with them. And a great Siddha Mahapurush talks to the Himalaya, talks to stone. But he says, I am writing this book for alive, conscious people. Who wants to speak to stones? Listen, Srinuta. I am addressing you all. You are dynamic beings. Don't sit inertly like that, like in front of a television, like a potato, like we all have started doing as our evening ritual. Listen to the news. You contribute nothing. You are dehumanizing yourself. Listen, I'm addressing you all. Daily going to bed at night and waking up in the morning. Why are you making futile efforts, running after meaningless things? Instead, if you enter, even for a fraction of an instant, into that divine citadel of Shiva consciousness, of what use would then be for you these puny little philosophical descriptions with which I have filled up my book You don't need my book. You will know the truth firsthand on your own. That last line, I'll say twice in Sanskrit. Pashanam prativaktuka. Who wants to speak to stone? Shinutamo. I'm saying this to all of you. Abhinavagupta says to his readers. Yusman Bruve Jangama. You can walk. You can walk. You don't have to sit. Stuck your eyes on your mobile phone and forget how to read like this and only read like this. You don't have to be that way. Shaya Uttaya Shayottayam Anarthayam Anartham Arthasarane Koayam Vritha Eva Udyama Vritaiva Udyama Samvit in that Tham, that citadel of Samvit. Samvit means consciousness. That citadel of consciousness in yourself, in this flesh, which is full of consciousness, sensitivity. It is tingling with subjectivity for all of us. Samvit Dhamani, Shambhave, Vishathaje. If you enter Kaliyam Ekam Navam, one little fraction of a second. Kim Kim Varnanika Viravi. This Varnanika, it is a diminutive. My book gives a description, third person description of how is it the Purush, what it is like to be an enlightened being. You will be the enlightened being. Kim Kim Varnanika Viravi Abhita. This is like circumlocution all around the topic. Enter. Last line. Satyam Swayam Jnasyata. You will know the truth yourself. Satyam Swayam Jnasyata. Thank you.
So we can open it for discussion. Anyone?
Should give it to them.
You can invite the audience online also. Okay. Ali.
Yes, thank you.
My question is whether to replace I over the other categories by saying that I can know listen better than the other two categories. And that process you are giving I status over other two categories. But when we pick up language, do you think we pick up the word I in a special way that it is different from the way you pick up the name of an object or the word stands for? Another thing struck me was, I'll start from the statement there in the state. There it becomes in practice. It's like this, it says that God cannot express himself in the world. And you are trying to bring God into the world. I think it is lateral field also. Wittgenstein once said God is expressed in the world. World is rather opaque in its lateral field. So you are trying to invoke God into a there is place where he cannot be present. These are
two questions. Very, very important. I would like to repeat the questions. By the way, this all proceedings being recorded.
Yes. Yes.
So, the recording half is sound. So, let me repeat your question. Very good question. First question. Am I privileging I or hum, first person, compared to the other nouns and names like you and he and they and it and this, etc. And the spirit of the question is, I should not privilege the first person, and a very good reason given in the question itself by the person who asked that how long we have our language from others. And even after I have learned from others, how can myself have a special privilege? First question. Am I confused? I'm saying the question is so relevant, and I am in 100% agreement with the spirit of the question. Right? And that is why in this meet, I'm very careful of the organizers of giving me a chance because I'm still working on these matters. Your question, the first question, gives me an opportunity to give my latest new theory about the meaning of life. I'll come to that. The second question actually refers to our Wittgenstein, the tractators. Now, about the spirit of the second question, I totally disagree. Because in my talk, I talked about consciousness, subjectivity, and karma. I never used the word God. And definitely not the Christian creator God, who can be obeyed, unknowable, etc., etc. So, let me answer the second question first, then I'll come back to the first question. So then, with every act of aggression, the identity with the three sense of identification that I was claiming is not between Brahma and Atma. That may be derived and that may be suggested. And again, even if I do that, by saying that early tractators Wittgenstein does not agree with me, that's not a question I should take very seriously. Tractators Wittgenstein does not even agree with later Wittgenstein himself. So I don't expect him to agree with me. I love the tractators. I have taught it for 40 years. And the doctrine is very elegant. But the notion of God is the notion of God being unknown. It's a little bit like God's noumena theory. But the notion of a little baby crawling with a tattoo in his hand as the consciousness whom I worship, that is not the unknown. That's right now. I have a dishwasher lady who helps me in Ashoka University. And she lists the number of members in our family. I, my son, my two daughters, my husband, and Kanha. I said, who's Kanha? She said, well, my Laddu Gopal. That's the concept of God. Now, something deeper is going on. So, this consciousness, which is called here, Brahman, Chaitanya, Ramchandra Gandhi's consciousness, is also the ultimate, playful, free subjectivity compared to this. Even my ego is objective, not subjective. So that brings me to the privilege. In standard Western philosophy, from Descartes onward, there is obviously a privilege of the right. Because, as you said, I know myself more intimately than others. This myself need not be a substance. It could be like Buddhist self. But there is a certain personal privilege. It's got by Gilbert Ryle privilege access. It's detected by the West. And I myself am the Advaita communities. The most wise thing you can say about yourself is, I don't know myself. So in that sense, I'm not privileged. The mother can sometimes confidently say, I know my child better than I know myself. Love very often makes us perhaps falsely confident about the other person. But any confidence that I have in saying, oh, I am completely knowledgeable about myself is totally false. So there is no privilege of life. Then what is privilege? What is privilege is not the ego or ahankara, but the subjectivity which you cannot avoid. Why? Because, as Michel Foucault actually says in the book called All of Things, it is easier in Madness and other books, but even history of sexuality. But Order of Things is his main ontology book, phenomenology book, where he says this is the predicament we have. I can be a scientist and I say, I have seen it in the laboratory. I would ask the scientist, wait a minute, does it happen in the laboratory? Yes, I've seen it. Who has seen it? I have seen it. Even the scientist who is someone who objectively, he privileges his own experiments to testimony in scientific field. That's another person's observation. I can take my observation. And here, Kant and Abhinavagupta, they are all in way. And I think that this I is not Arindam Chakrabarti. This I has no address. And this I. Now, your most important question. How did I learn the meaning of that? My mother said I. That's what I learned. Another person said I am a baby. I can cry. I don't know. Somebody else says I. Man, I learn. They don't mean me. They mean them. But here is from addressing journey. I mainly, I want to explain it. I'm sure you'll understand. I learned the meaning of my I by being addressed by you. So I am opposite of privileging. I am privileging you. And I'm saying I in everybody means you of you. It is the second person of the second person. Because all my life, I wait for somebody to address me. When they do, I don't respond. I am thankful. I am ill. I am angry with you. But I have to say this to somebody. Who is that somebody? Who calls me a you? I call him a you. I am the you of you.
Okay. Professor Paneerselvam is online. Professor Paneerselvam.
Okay.
So please go ahead with your question.
Thank you very much, Professor Arindam ji, for your wonderful talk. I've been very much benefited by it. Of course, as usual, it is a pleasure to listen to you. I have two short questions, Professor Arindam ji. Very beautifully in the beginning of your lecture, you have explained the significance of Ramu Gandhi's presuppositions of human communication. I would like to know from you how to situate this book of Ramu Gandhi in the modern theory of communication. Because especially this is very much, I would say, is necessary in the context of Derrida as well as Habermas. Because in Gandhi, we see the dominance of speech over writing. And Searle's argument, though is important, I mean, the distinction which he makes between the brute fact and the institutional fact is, though it is disputed by Gandhi, it is very much essential to contextualize Gandhi in the modern trend so that the Western scholars would understand the significance of Ramu Gandhi. This is what I would like to know from you, because you are a well-read scholar both in Indian and Western tradition. And also one more short question, Arindam ji. You were speaking, I read one of your previous article on Ramu Gandhi, wherein you talk about the inner first person experience. And you argue that it is a fundamental question of identity and self. Now, this is a very essential argument of yours, which has to be situated in Ramu Gandhi. How do you situate this?
Okay, thank you. Can I answer? Can I answer in this? Then I will mostly address your first question. And I'm saying there is a long section of the paper that I was reading. I will tell you, Professor Mani Salman, it has a section called The Continuity of Ramchandra Gandhi's Thought from Presuppositions to I Am Now. And you are right. That initially, it starts from Christ and Saul, the speech attitude. I wish he did more with Austin, but he does not do too much. In the presuppositions, he is not a non-dualist, but he has tendencies towards this one thing that was his theme all his life, which is that the fundamental act, linguistic act, is a communicative act of going up to a person and addressing them. This one business of having inert objects and putting it and making a picture on it. Right? In a big conference or ultimate sort of formal dinner at the end of a world summit, every chair has a name in front of the table. There is a name tag. Now, Rahul Gandhi's theory of language, and I would say all of Indian theory of language is not only superficially based on the oral tradition of talking in person, it also underestimates and deprivileges this written word. So, just as if my friend doesn't come to the dinner, I cannot see his name. The name tag is not the person, however much it might be written. Similarly, when a friend comes and eats, or my guest, or my baby, or my child actually is present, I don't need the name as a written word. So the written word is neither necessary nor sufficient for the actual human communication. In fact, the sound of you, I would say, hey, and that's why before saying Krishna, both in English and Sanskrit, we say, Hey Krishna. You know, some description, some names, some pronouns, tum, tum. These are all spoken. And in speech, that happens. Whereas we want documentation. If you take a legalistic approach to language, then it doesn't matter what you say, what you write and sign. That is a Western civilizational mark of writing, because writing can be counterfeited. You can forge signature. You can, please don't overinterpret my reference here. You can also fake a diploma, written degree. But if you make the speaker on a topic of that subject, on political science or entire political science, you will find out. So that is the mark of knowledge and interpersonal caring. Now, it's not that Libby was not known. You are right that Derrida, in of grammatiology, privileges writing in some sense. That is against the standard Indian view. Not only because Shruti was unwritten, Mahabharata was written. We have a name of a writer, Ganesha was writing, and Vyasa was dictating. But writing is neither necessary nor sufficient for communication. These are dead letters. In fact, in Abhinavagupta, his view is that when we can gather correct information from the newspaper, we are having true beliefs, but not knowledge. From Libby, we can only have aprama. In Libby, we don't have Sabdabodha, but Sabdabrahma. This is so much anti-graphics in our tradition. And Ramu comes in that tradition. But there is an evolution of this law from presuppositions of human communication. All the way to I am thou. I am thou is all about Advaita and address to Advaita. So I'm just trying to cover one aspect of that.
Yeah, please.
Namaste, sir. Thank you for the profound lecture. I feel grossly underqualified to ask you a question, but I really want your you say something about this significance of addressing. How is it important in teaching between a teacher and a student? So, in a live lecture or online, what is lost in an online mode? And now there is in AI, they have AI class. They're saying AI teachers. They've replaced teachers with an AI. What is lost now with respect to address? Thank you.
Look, large question, very practical question now, very important question. The whole context of the addressing theory actually comes from teaching. Why? Because both in Plato's dialogues, which is conversation, as well as European Bhaktis and other people's dialogue and in the entire voices, where many lessons are given between question and answer. So there's a separate part of my own research now, which not the first person, not the oral writing, but the act of asking a question. Questions, jigyasa, inquiry, and the interrogative form is, I think, the spirit of human consciousness. Okay, now you say, now as students in Ashoka, it's good to taking only one philosophy course for a foundation, they don't understand. If I have got it for the William General Trial, I will tell them the app can answer the question, but can it invent your question? He said, I got it wrong. Very sophisticated person. If you give them a text, they will check that question first. Why? Because there is a reason why AI is called artificial. We think it's better than intelligence. But the original paper, okay, by Turing, from the source of Turing machine was called the imitation game. It imitates. If it imitates Brahma realization, it will produce an artificial Brahma realization. That doesn't take away the fact that question and answer are the primary mode of communication. You say, do we need the physical presence of people? Then you have to go through another level of investigation. For instance, all the five senses are active in a teaching situation. And all I will say is that the proximity of the teacher and the student, which because of all sorts of very legitimate issues of sexual harassment, this, that, we are now, in fact, a whole lot of teachers and students in COVID time. And they still want to continue that. They don't have to get up from bed. I used to teach also for 2 years online. And I would say, like at the end of this conversation, he said, my host, the head of the department, do you have any questions? Often they'll be silent. And then I found out some questions that they're asking were actually recorded before. The person wasn't there. And finally, the climax of AI learning was when I asked them to switch video, there was no sound, there was no switch on, and this is infringement of privacy. You can't ask them to teach on their video, especially guys students. But this was a boys' room. And finally, in the audio, when I actually said, hey, you heard me teach this. What are your questions? Do you understand anything? I heard loud snoring. That's what you avoid if there is in person, unless you are absolutely shameless. And of course, some of us have learned to keep on with simple us, but actually human. So there are problems about. But the word overlation means sitting close to the teacher, not too close. For an old person, you might get spat upon because things come out. But even this was surprised when the Vedic chanter loudly speaks. And he said, Abhinavagupta, some spitting might come out. And the Sanskrit text call it Brahmavindu.
Professor from Nalanda University. Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Can you hear me, please? Am I audible?
Yes, louder, louder. Yes, louder, louder.
Okay, louder. Yes. So, thank you so much for the lecture, dear professor. I'd just like to share some observations on the line of thought where you said that the addressed and the addressee become non-different in the vocative. But my observation is more on the line of how the addressed and the addressee become non-different in perception. So if I could just share that with you here, with your permission, where the object and the perceiver become non-different. Yeah. So just my small observation here as follows. According to one view, perception results from consciousness directly acquainting objects of perception, where the object illustrated is illustrated as a form of cognition and momentary. And by implication, the means of perception becomes non-distinct with perception itself, i.e., identical with it. Now, to illustrate this is a scenario here. When a layman who is standing in front of a wall is asked what the thing he sees ahead of him is, he is most likely to say, "Oh, it is the wall only." The layman does not answer in the way, "My eyes see the wall," let alone, "My eyes come in connection with the wall." We may say that by saying this, the layman collapses the distinction between the eyes and the wall, rather, the eyes which see the wall, thereby collapsing the distinction between the eyes, which may be called as the means of seeing, and the object of sight itself. However, so this model does not accommodate the possibility of perception being a two-term relation here as such between the perceiver and the object. However, the goal of consciousness,
Please be brief.
perceiving consciousness, yeah, I just end with this, sir. The goal of consciousness perceiving consciousness comes at a price in the case of perception, perhaps not in the case of vocative, which is there is now no common public external object to perceive. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. I had promised something in the beginning of the lecture, which I forgot to do. And in answer to your question, I will do that. If you got what she was saying, that there are three factors, even in Kashmir Shaivism. This is called the object of knowledge, pramata, the knower, and the pramana. And the pramana is the instrument of knowledge. Okay, in the case of perception, it is the sense organ. So, in English, it sounds like the same. I am seeing with the eye. So one is single letter I, the other is UID. By the way, in the tractators, there is one diagram of the visual field, and at the corner of the visual field is the sense or the eye. So, here also, remember one topic of the talk, we talk about the significance of middle, the middle term, madhyam. So, second person is in the middle between first person and third person. Between Abhinavagupta is the form. In fact, Abhinavagupta makes a point that can be made in German language also. He says about the other, that we say asti. In German, ist, das ist. Ist, ist. About the self, we say ich bin, aham asmi. Now look at asmi and asti. What is in the middle? It takes out the difference making ma and ta. If you take out the ma from asmi, and if you take out the ta from asti, what are you left with? Asi. And that is what is asi. Ist. It is the mixture of ist and bin. Is ist. Here, in the field of perception, if you focus on the eyes, which is usually because sense organs don't show themselves, they show the object. But the sense organ has a proxy subjectivity as well as the form of the object. So in the sense organ, the middle, the instrumental case, chakshusha pashyati, the pure subjectivity shows as well as the object. So that is actually the yogic and tantric way of through meditation, thinking of that non-dual perspective as sense organ of the sense organ. That is why How do you describe Atman Brahman? Shrotrasya Shrotam Manaso Manoja Chakshushas Chakshu. I am the eye. You are the ear. So through the middle of Brahmana, the Brahman of Brahman, the mind of the mind, you get to that unified vision. And in this context, I would ask the Nalanda University person and all of the audience here to answer a question of mine. I ask you the question. Suppose you are standing in front of the mirror. Obviously, except a child, nobody will say that in the mirror I am there. It's not I, it's a mirror image. Now compare this with myself standing with my twin brother or somebody who looks like me, and a friend at home. What are the similarities between looking at a mirror image of oneself and looking at another person? Similarities are, if I am looking north, then my mirror image looks south. It has. I cannot make my mirror image face the same direction. If we face each other, we face in opposite direction. Same with you. If I, when both look at the tree, we may face the same direction. But if we face each other, we are facing opposite. This is like a fair. This is similarity between looking at my reflection and you. But the disability is that my mirror image has no freedom. It will have to do what I do. If I fix my hand, it raises its hand. Suppose you're fed up. Okay, you are scratching your eyes. And like a philosopher said, you blame the mirror image. So scratching your eyes. You're not me. That's true. There can be two of me. So a mirror image is not me. It is a distinct object. I am a subject, it is an object. But it's irritatingly, annoyingly, existential annoyance. It does what I do. It is completely a mechanical indicator. You are not there. I face both my mirror image and you. But you are as free as I am. You, especially if you are a thinker, like my first question asker, you will ask a question like this. That's why I love you. Not because you are my mirror image. If you are a Prime Minister who wants all your audience to wear Prime Minister masks, then you better not come to any meeting. You stay at home with a full-length mirror. You talk to yourself. You will hear your voice. You will repeat, no freedom. If you enjoy the freedom of your friends, would you like to go see a movie tonight? No, I want to study tonight. You want to study tonight? No, I want to go to see a film. That's your friendship. And that is accuracy. Giving the notice of the freedom of the other person. The other person is not my clone. So this identity is not based on imitation. It is based on being the same consciousness in spite of being different individuals. The plurality has to be essential. And that is why there is a section in the book which is to shake all of you by saying that you don't have it here. Although you have, I have something. You establish a small center for Ramchandra Gandhi research study. These books, not just PDFs, but actual books And also, people continue, and people write a critical. But then, it has to be giving notice of this pattern. It can be different. And the differences are the real basis of friendship. Not so Muni, all the philosophical thinkers are Muni. Manana, Muni Ramchandra. A Muni is somebody who does thinking of his own. What did Abhinavagupta say in my last sentence? Satyam swayam jnana. Find the truth yourself. It's a bit different. Ekam sat vipra bhavla vadanti. And nasasumari jasya madam nabheda. Yadi madam nabheda, so miremana.
Okay. Professor Pradap.
Last question.
Yeah. Okay.
Last question.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chakrabarti,
You need the last word.
for your very illuminating lecture. Just I'm seeking a clarification than a
Switch on your mic because it has to be recorded. See if it is working.
Thank you, Professor Chakrabarti, for your very, very illuminating lecture.
Yes, yeah.
So let me just come to the focus of the lecture, that is addressing.
Yeah.
And Rahul Gandhi has really led or privileged addressing over all the speech acts. My question or my query is regarding this concept of address. Is it necessary to privilege this particular speech act of addressing the other over all others, like denotative and connotative modes of or descriptive modes of language? My primary doubt is this, that no addressing, however singular it may be, can be free from the descriptive background of what Wittgenstein will call the language game in which it occurs. So there is a lot of grammatical preparation for that. So addressing cannot be a bare act of addressing the other or drawing the attention to the other. This is precisely where the presupposition, this first one, really gives privacy to this act of address. But as he goes on in the availability, also I am down, perhaps I have not read that, I don't have it. So, but in religious ideas, he has again brought the concept of soul and the concept of human being. So there is a lot of background check for making addressing itself a very prominent act of language use. For example, your example of Kali, I am not addressing the stone or the clay, but addressing Mother Goddess.
Yeah.
So that itself is a kind of
Descriptive context.
descriptive commitment. So, do you think these presuppositions required really strengthening his position by not dissociating addressing from the language itself, or from the culture itself, or from the social setup itself, but situating it in it? Thank you.
Yeah, very, very valid points. Broadly speaking, every part of speech, like verb, preposition, noun, adjective, adverb, all of them, and in Sanskrit grammar, the nominative, the accusative, the instrumental, they are all mutually dependent. And the notion of forms of life or the language game's context shows that it is very easy to be a holist about all of language. But the point that Ramachandra makes against holism is that ultimately, as Wittgenstein said, meaning dawns on the whole system gradually. But we learn piece by piece. So when you ask the question, which is the primary element of language, you are asking which is the element which can do without all the other elements. No. You're asking In what sense primary? Now, in Indian schools of philosophy of language, they can be considered for the primary, not address. In fact, most makes addressing. Right? As I said, the great philosopher of language who's non-partisan, who expresses and gives exposition of every other view, and he himself, he's an Abhinavagupta origin, but he says, vimarśa say this, they say this. So, there is the grammarians themselves that from the descriptive point of view, the event that is happening, the action that is being done or commanded, that is the center. So, Shakti. So you start with that, not because the child learns the word first. It has nothing to do with psychogenesis of how language is first learned, but conceptually, Shakti. Then you ask the question, shut what to? The door. So now you do the unwilling. The verb says shut the door. Pass. PA says pass. Verb. Then you ask pass what? The salt. I'm eating on the table, pass the salt. Who is talking to? There is an implicit zero suffix in Shakti in English, but in Sanskrit, every second person objective. You should pass person. So there is second person. Okay. With your hand, shut the door. Instrumental case. So all of these will come in the door by the different books. This is one picture of language learning. The reason why Abhinavagupta would support Ramchandra Gandhi in making sambodhana name is the answer to your question, my answer to yours. Question and answer. If that is made as a thing, then at least the person who asks the question cannot have a descriptive content, because then we will have Vino's paradox. For example, if I tell you, hey, what is quantum mechanics? You is teacher. You are the teacher. If the teacher says, I don't understand your question, what do you mean by quantum mechanics? I would say, I don't know, that's why I'm asking you. So don't ask me to describe it. Like if I say, who's my mother? Some lost child, abandoned child, or something, looking for his mother. Who's my mother? They might not know what mother means. So the ultimate push and the bite, the edge of your question is, without descriptive content, can sambodhana work? I have tried to say that there is descriptive content. And that is why two sambodhanas, Hare, Murare, Shubha, Advaita, Nama, Parvati, Pati, descriptive content. Husband of Parvati is a description, is a property. But I am not making an assessment. If you say, I can even go and say, ultimate example, given by Advaita, in a book called Politics of Friendship, I can go up to a friend and say, my dear friend, I have realized I have no friends. Am I using descriptive content when I say friend? I don't mean that you have the quality of being friendship with me. I just thought this goes back to Rousseau's phenomenology of language, which is sharp exclamations. Oh, yuck! Like emotive theory methods. The dictionary first exclaims that you have to bring the centrality of exclamation, emotional expression, asking, crying. What is the means of calling? is crying, not in the sense of shedding tears, but shouting to help. Come help me. If this is the center of linguistic communication, then for a care community, come, go. These are all ultimately based on almost a non-descriptive, non-referential act of calling attention. Of course, it's a miracle. How I can call your attention without pushing you. Pushing you is coercive. If I can't do that, but the child cries, and some cries are sambodhana. So this is a large topic. I am not agreeing 100% with Ramchandra Gandhi, but I was giving an exposition where I was bringing Kant's What is Man, Abhinavagupta's Sambodhana, and Ram Gandhi together to have a kind of fun with fusion philosophy. Thank you very much.
Teacher, I will invite Dr. Thierry to give a vote of thanks.
Don't worry, I'll be very brief. On the behalf of the Department of Philosophy, University of Hyderabad, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to our highly esteemed speaker, Professor Arindam Chakrabarti, for delivering thought-provoking and engaging lecture today. We could not have hoped for a more fitting speaker for our annual Ramchandra Gandhi Memorial Lecture. Sir, we are grateful for your time, effort, and passion you brought into this lecture. Though many of us are not fortunate to have met Professor Ramchandra Gandhi in person, your talk has revealed a great deal of insight as to what kind of philosopher and scholar had established this department for us. By using his own philosophical work, you have invoked in a very powerful manner his presence in our midst. It's not every day that we get to hear and learn from someone with such depth of knowledge and clarity of thought, especially on a topic as intricate, abstract, and profound as the one you delivered today. Thank you. Special thanks to all the participants, audience, for your attentive presence and thoughtful questions and comments. For those who joined us online, I think some of you are still there. Thank you for your enthusiasm and staying with us till the end. It is such a delight to see our teachers and builders of this department. One of them is here, Professor Harsi Pradhan. Thank you for your presence. We missed our friends, our teachers. I would like to thank our head of the department, Professor Lanka, and my colleagues who did an excellent job in coordinating and arranging this successful lecture. To end, I believe the powerful ideas presented and discussed will continue to inspire and guide the conversation on the theme explored today, even beyond this hall. Once again, a big thank you to one and all. We hope to welcome you back next year for our annual Ramchandra Gandhi Memorial Lecture 2026. Thank you.